Welcome to the AUANews Inside Tract podcast. Today's episode, brought to you by AUA's Medical Student Membership Workgroup, features a conversation between workgroup member Vivian Wong and Brett Teplitz, the Northeastern Section representative to the AUA Residents and Fellows Committee, on how medical students can best prepare for their sub-I rotations.
Just for the audience's sake, my name is Vivian Wong. I'm a third-year med student at Pitt. I'm with Brett Teplitz right now. So I actually think we met once at the AUA. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah.
Brett.
I think it might have been at the Pitt event. I think we had the tuna nachos.
Yeah, the ahi tuna, exactly, yeah. I remember specifically because you were one of the only residents that was taking time to chat with the med students, so that was greatly appreciated.
It was good to see you again. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So I think the overarching topic for this podcast is just to ask from a resident's perspective, how can med students interested in urology specifically be best prepared for their sub-internship or acting internship.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess I'd like to just start with, who are you? How'd you end up where you are? Where are you at in your training, etc.? Just so people can get an idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, my name is Brett Teplitz. I'm a PGY 5 at UPMC here in Pittsburgh. I did my undergrad at Dartmouth Med School in Rochester, New York. Took a gap year working in public health between those for a year. And now I'm in year 5 out of 6 in Pittsburgh, applying for a pediatric fellowship this winter. And I'm from New York originally.
Amazing. Where in New York are you from originally?
I'm from Long Island, so a town called Dix Hills, right smack in the middle.
Got it. And so I guess you are also applying to fellowship. You're very intimately familiar with this whole application process times too.
The stakes are a little lower, but similar mindset for going into things again, overthinking everything.
For sure. I mean, I get that 100%. Okay, so at Pitt now, PGY 5 out of 6. I guess maybe I'll just start with from a resident's perspective. When you see med students be on your service, either through a surgery clerkship or on an AI, what are things that you think med students should be doing that are good, and what things do you think maybe students should be doing less of from your perspective?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and is kind of the question that, again, even if you're not too far away mentally or emotionally from what it was like to be in that position, doing your sub-Is is stressful. You're in, even if it's your own program, but for the most part, especially for the visiting ones, you're in a new city, new environment. You are kind of feeling like you're always being watched. In a lot of ways, you're not, but also at the same point, anything, you never know what that moment is that someone's going to remember about you. So unfortunately, in some ways, yes. And you're really trying to figure out, how do you find your place in a new system? How do you shine without being overbearing? How do you get a sense of that program, have them get a sense of you, especially you're seeing them when the residents and the attendings, they're busy. So trying to figure out how to, build things in there. But the nice thing is with your sub-I, you have time. It's not, just one day with one person. Typically you have time to build relationships, and you have time to learn about the program both before, during, and after. And so I think some of the key things, and I'm sure we'll touch on some things more specifically, key things that I would recommend is, when you first get there, go to the new hospital before you start, or if it's multiple sites, try to figure out where things are, what you do and don't have access to. You might not get your ID badge until your first day, so you might be a little bit limited, but just kind of going through the motions makes it a little bit less scary. The number one thing, honestly, is being early. And I know a lot of people say it, and the old Tom Coughlin saying of if you're earlier on time, you don't know the traffic patterns, you don't know the place, you don't know the layout of the hospital, where anything is. You don't want to be stressed, dripping in sweat, and flustered to start the day every day, that's going to be really, really stressful. And so by doing that, it unlocks a lot of opportunities, gives you time to be calm, gives you time to see things, gives you time to process things before you have to present. And when you have time, you can be calmer, under control, polite. When you're in a rush and you're stressed, that's when things kind of fall by the wayside. So that would be the number one thing that I would really, push.
And if I can interject as well, like how early is early? Like for the med student listeners out there, what does that mean practically?
That's a really good question. It depends where you are, and it also depends on the day. So typically at most places, if it's an OR day, the ORs start around 7:30, depending on the hospital. And so the teams will have to round beforehand, and then the chiefs and the consult residents will have to update attendings on plans and things like that. And you might have pre-op conference, or you might have grand rounds, or you might have other things that can shift what that start time is on any given day. It also depends on how big the list is, and what your expectations are. Are you expected to pre-round? Are you expected to write notes? Are you expected to help them make the list? All of those things will kind of get into it. The intern is going to be really your best friend in that regard. Ask what time they're getting in, and then as you get there 15 minutes beforehand.
Okay.
That will kind of give you a heads up. And again, yourself, like you can start out coming in extra early, and then you can kind of pare it back as you start to feel a little more comfortable and manage it. But yeah, that it could be as early as, sometimes you can get in to have a nice 6:30 start, but sometimes you might be getting in there well before the sun rises. It all depends on what they need that day.
Fair enough. Okay. So what I'm hearing is show up early, go to the hospital beforehand. What else are some things that med students should be doing for their sub-I that are good?
I would ask expectations. Again, a lot of this is going to come from the chief on the service or the attending in clinic. When you get there, it's never wrong to say, what is expected of me? Do you want me to help write notes? Do you expect me to see patients, consults independently? This will also vary depending on who the intern is. For example, they might want your help making lists. They might prefer to do it themselves and do their own system. Some places you have access to write notes, and it's helpful to do that. Sometimes it's not. So asking what they want and what they expect. And then if you are asked, and I know for the med students who maybe have never made a list before, I know not every hospital does that. It's essentially printing the patient list in the morning, and depending on what the hospital computer system is and what that includes, sometimes that includes, writing down the labs, the ins and outs, what antibiotics or blood thinners the patient's on, what procedure they had. That'll all vary based on, preference, but that is a common thing that you will ask to be doing on a lot of your rotations. It'll be something to kind of familiarize yourself with. But again, asking expectations, and then you can know if you can meet them and exceed them. And if you don't know what's asked, you don't want to find out later on that you were supposed to be doing something, or they didn't want you doing something that you keep doing.
I think that's like really good advice, and probably advice that people wouldn't necessarily think of when they're, just like showing up to a new city or even showing up to their own institution. And I guess kind of going along with that, like how should we as med students be thinking of or like conceptualizing what the goals are for a sub-I or an acting internship?
Yeah.
Like what are you supposed to be getting out of what? I think that's not really touched on by med students or med schools.
I think what you're getting out of it, a lot of it is for you, and a lot of it is also for that program itself. When you're there, you're getting a sense of fit for the program, how a particular hospital or program is run. It's a very long interview with that particular place. And it's also an opportunity for you to kind of test your skills and stretch your knowledge and put yourself out there. This will be an opportunity that you'll get to go in the operating room. You'll get to throw, stitches or be very involved. You get to, see patients and see consults, and hopefully you will have done your home site first. And by the way, that is also a recommendation that I would plug. If you have the opportunity to do your home site first before you do a visiting rotation, I would recommend that, because you can get your mistakes out, and you can have some of those growing pains in a safer, lower stakes environment where you already have a relationship and presumably people that you trust and some mentors that are going to be writing letters and other things. So if you can do your home site first, I think it will set you up for success for that visiting one. Obviously, a goal is, and honestly, an expectation at the end of your visiting rotation is to get a letter. And your performance on that rotation will feed into that. A lot of your feedback will come from the residents in addition to the attendings. You may not work with everyone for that long, but it becomes kind of a cumulative thing, and that letter of rec will be very helpful for when you're applying elsewhere. And it really is an opportunity for you to kind of test the program, test the city. I wouldn't recommend. Some people will choose their sub-I strategically, and there's no secret code on that. Some people say, oh, you should do if you're from the Northeast, do one out west, unlock the West or unlock the South. I have friends that attempted that and got 0 interviews out there. I have friends that didn't do that at all and got a bunch of interviews. There's no hard and fast rule, or at least that I'm aware of, or anyone will kind of open the back end of things and say that's what it is. So I would really make sure you look at places that you would potentially see yourself at. It's hard to know that early on, but think about also using it as different things. So for example, I did both of my visiting rotations were in urban environments, but one was a 2 resident per year program, one was a 5 resident per year program. This one was more community hospital, smaller based setup, and one was more big academic center. Kind of getting a sense of those things gives you an opportunity to see what it is that you want. And I found out that I did not want to be in a 2 resident per year program because taking Q2 call looked brutal and they were just burnt out.
Fair enough. And so actually I want to hit on a point that you talked about. So I'm trying to really hone in on what the med students want to know. And in terms of letters, do you think that if you're doing an away rotation specifically, or a away sub-I, is the expectation on the programs and that they will also be writing you a letter, or is that something that you need to be more proactive about? Okay.
The expectation is that you will be requesting a letter and that they will be providing one. And there shouldn't be any surprises. The programs will do it differently. Some of them might be straight up with you at the beginning and say, at the end, you're going to sit down with the chairman or the program director or the assistant program director, and they will kind of get some biographic information about you, and then they will incorporate feedback they've gotten. Some is, less formal, and you can ask someone. Getting that expectation when you arrive, ask the intern who, or the other residents. They will know, or they will ask, home sub-Is, people from the years before. They will get that information for you. But the expectation is that you will ask for one and that they will give you one.
Okay, cool. That's really useful to know.
And it's also helpful to know who's writing that letter, because then you can try to think, oh, let me make sure if you have the choice between 2 ORs that you can go to. If someone's writing your letter and you haven't had enough FaceTime with them, you might want to be selective.
Okay, that's super good to know. And then I guess on the flip side of my earlier question, what are some things that you have as a resident, or you've just observed, are things that med students do that are very not good on a rotation or a sub-I?
Yeah, I think that's also a really good question. Just kind of a quick aside on this. When I was a med student, I thought it was really hard to tell us apart. I thought we all worked really hard, pretended like we were, caring. When you get on the
telling med students apart, you mean telling the individual med students apart?
Telling us apart in terms of quality.
Yeah.
That everyone was working really hard and trying, maybe, variation in terms of knowledge fund and all that. But when you're on the other side, it's shockingly easy to tell the ones that just don't care, that are phoning it in. And you'd be honestly surprised at kind of the audacity of, what some people kind of show, but less so for the sub-Is, more for med students in general. But I think, again, it's the easy things that are easy to, they're easy until they're not. The best, they won't remember if you got a question wrong, you couldn't identify that artery. They won't remember that your presentation wasn't the tightest, that morning, that you kind of rambled a little bit. They will remember if you're late. They will remember if you lie, and they will remember if you throw someone under the bus. And that could be more or less subtle. And you think these things wouldn't happen, but they do, and they happen all the time. And so I think some things that what I would caution you about, situational awareness is probably one of the toughest things, because that's something that you build up over time. You get a sense, you can read the room a little better because you're more familiar with that environment. And it's that much tougher in a new environment with entire staff and residents and things you don't know. But one thing that I would advise against is showboating. And I know it sounds like strange you do that. You're trying to shine, you're trying to look up, but if you trying to be as conversational and personable and easygoing as possible, despite how stressed and anxious you might be, goes a long way. Like you throwing another sub under the bus, or calling them out for doing something, or talking over the middle of a critical case, saying, "Oh, can I go throw this stitch on the partial nephrectomy?" Yeah. That's not unfortunately, like, you can fall into that trap where you're trying to look good and you're trying to impress, but showboating is not a good look. Being like a gunner, like being prepared, knowing your stuff, is really important. But don't kind of like force it on there, because that at the end of the day, we're like, at least on the resident standpoint, that's not the person you want to be your co-resident next year. You don't want that person you feel like doesn't have your back, that's going to try to make them look good, at your expense. And so it's something to keep in mind, just kind of being aware, reading the room, offer to be helpful, but don't be like pushy. Don't, during a critical portion of the case is not the time to be, asking, by, be attending where they went to medical school or something like that. Just kind of, and take, you can also take your residence lead. If they're talking and joking, that's a good time you can join in. If they look serious, time for you to get serious too.
Fair enough. I feel like it's also really sometimes difficult for med students to have that situational awareness, and people are basically telling you, have social skills, but those are some very like actionable items that med students can take into account.
Yeah. And now one other like actionable advice: it's okay to get something wrong. Don't get the same thing wrong twice. And also is important. This is also important, when you're coming up as a resident. This kind of goes with the whole lying thing. It's absolutely okay to say, "I don't know, but I'll look that up and get back to you." It shows humility. It shows interest, and then actually follow up and do it. Or if they ask about something, like if you actually do that, that shows initiative and follow through. Especially, we know how busy and stressed you guys are. It's a lot on your plate, but if you go ahead and do that, or something came up, a strange question on round, someone brought up a question, your resident got pimped on something, they didn't know it, it's some esoteric thing. If you go and it's like, "Hey, I looked this up, I found this paper," and then you tell them that's like a subtle way that you can kind of do those sorts of things.
Got it. Any other things that people tend to either, unintentionally try to lie about, or just like not be super honest about, the people that are tendencies on rotations?
I think some examples are maybe you pre-rounded on a patient and, they asked, "Oh, what did their drain look like?" You're like, "Oh, I forgot they had a second JP on that side," or you didn't look under the dressing, or they ask, and this is more for, other teams consult about something like, "Oh, did you flush that guy's catheter?" You say yes, and then they show up and they still have the red tape on the catheter connected to the pulley. You did not, or you did it through the luer lock, which is how you're not supposed to do it. But again, if you didn't know, or like they ask, "Oh, what was their creatinine?" Don't guess like, "Oh, I think it was like 0.8-ish." You say, "Oh, I'm not sure. Let me look it up." It was exactly that.
Okay, so
because the trap is like when you get asked something that you think you should know. That's when you feel really guilty, and then you try to cover because you're nervous and you know that you should know it. But like I said, saying like, "Oh, I should know that. I'm sorry. I'll let you know." They're not going to remember that. They will remember, "Oh, Vivian, said it was this, but it was actually completely wrong." Like again, it could be innocent. Maybe you confused the wrong patient, but that's the kind of thing where you can get yourself in trouble.
Yeah. So owning your level of knowledge wherever that is.
Right. And one other thing, and this will also be a thing in residency, but especially that comes with the situation awareness. When you come into an OR, introducing yourself, being humble, always offering to pull your own gloves and gown. Pitfalls, you might think the next step of the case, and you might be tempted to ask for that instrument. As a med student, as a sub-I, don't ask for instruments. The circulators and the scrub techs, they are a tight knit group and they are really close with us and the attendings, but they also gossip and they, there's a pride involved, and you coming in as an outsider, like asking for things, just treat them with your appropriate respect and be, very careful. Don't, again, you're tempted to prove that you know the next step, or like you're asking for the things, but as you're always assume you're the lowest on the totem pole, and always, offer to do things. Don't expect things. Don't ask for things.
That's so fair and super useful. Okay, good to know. I guess is there anything that you did like to prepare for your away rotations or your home sub-I or acting interns that you thought were really helpful, like in terms of resources or just general things to prepare?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And I think we have 26 sub-Is coming through this season. I asked, some of our current sub-Is if there was like, what the latest is and what people are using, because we have things that we use. I think in terms of resources, I'd probably say the AUA core curriculum is one of the top things I could recommend. That's also, even among the residents, being a top resource that they will use too. If you want to read about, you got a stricture case coming up, you can read about urethral strictures. It's extremely detailed, well thought out. They have, PowerPoint presentations. That's a good way to get a lot of information about a particular topic. There's a Reader's Pocket Guide. This is a popular thing that, residents and med students have. You can buy it online. It comes like in a spiral notebook. There's probably an electronic PDF version you can get these days. That has pretty good, concise, high-yield stuff for different things that might come up. You get asked to see this consult. You get asked to go into this case that you weren't prepared for. You can quickly kind of get up to speed on that. There are some more dense texts, like Campbell Walsh is, the gold standard urology text, but you don't have to be reading Campbell's before you go in. If you're going to do your sub-I presentation and you want to go to, get a full dive into that topic, that's a good one. Hinman's Atlas is a good one. There's some Anki decks out there. And then honestly, if you are going into a particular case, YouTube or Google, sometimes if you see that attending had done something, for example, our recon guy, he's, published on a lot of the stuff that we're doing. He shows videos at these conferences. You can actually see how they do something. YouTube you have to be a little bit careful because that's not vetted in the same way. It might not be how they do it. It could be outdated. It could be how something's done in a different country with different resources. So have, an index of suspicion there, but that can be helpful. And then for cases, you can also ask the residents ahead of time, hey, I'm doing a cystectomy, or I'm doing a prostatectomy with our chair tomorrow. What should I ask about? Because they will help you. They will say, hey, this attending loves to ask about this layer. Make sure you know this thing, or they love to pip about this topic, or be prepared for this. And they can, because they've gone through it, they know people that have done it. The residents really are a resource, and if you go to them, this kind of goes on topic where the residents are busy, they're tired, they're stressed, they're balancing all these things. They want to teach, they don't always have the time. Anything that you can do to make it easy for them to help you, like asking specific questions, like, hey, I'm doing this case, how would you prepare for this? Or what's something that I should know beforehand? They can kind of help guide it. But those are kind of some of the big resources.
Help them help you.
Exactly.
For sure. Okay. I'm trying to think. So I guess I have the last couple questions I have kind of relate to, you had touched on briefly before, choosing sub-Is, aways based on geography, that kind of thing. Do you have any just dull advice on choosing sub-Is? I know you said there's not really one way to do it, but any pearls of wisdom there?
I think ultimately this is a very personal decision, and again, you're gonna drive yourself crazy trying to go through the game theory of, do I choose a program in this region or do that? The old advice was, if you don't think that you're strong in person, don't do a sub-I at the place that you really want to go to, which I think was kind of funny. But generally, if there's a place that you think you really want to consider and that you think would be potentially a good fit, it's very worthwhile doing it. Or some people kind of play a little bit of a geography game, pick something in that area so you get a sense of Is that a city or a region? And I also encourage you to consider, like, again, size of program, setup of program, part of the country. Doing something like that for yourself can kind of help guide you. But I know things have changed. The token system is out there. There's lots of other ways to show interest without doing, an away rotation of that particular site. Ultimately, it's a personal decision. I would solicit feedback from everyone you can. Talk to people in your program. Talk to, program director, mentors. If you happen to know anyone at other places or friends that are in med school elsewhere, if they can put you in contact with someone ahead of time to ask their perspective on program. The residents, or usually they're honest. We don't really have incentive to lie about programs. And like especially if you're with your connection, they're not going to lie to you and have you come there and just be like, gotcha. Yeah, I think ask your questions, ask them honestly. Again, when you're on the site, you don't have to be like, oh, I heard, you had this, terrible thing. This person left, this person, whatever. Like, you don't have to be grilling them, on site when you're trying to be professional and personal there. But ask your questions, because if you don't, it's only to your disservice.
Fair enough. I think those are all really good points, and like really good points for med students to keep in mind. My last question for you is anything you would do differently or similarly looking back as a med student in terms of your sub-I specifically that you can think of?
I think a couple things. What I would say is the main thing, which is the hardest part, is just figure out ways to be helpful, any way you can to be helpful. And sometimes that's just, carrying supplies, anticipating what you're going to need, carrying a syringe, there's some catheters that need to be pulled, figuring out, oh, they've got to call some outside hospital to get a culture. Like, whatever that you can do to be helpful and offload some work off your residents, that's going to be really helpful, because not only is that helpful and then they're going to like you because you help them, it also shows that you're paying attention, that you're anticipating, that you kind of have a sense of the things that are the bottlenecks, the things that are pain points, the things that will, delaying patient care. Really figure out any way at all that you can do that. Another weird one is the most menial task that you can do, but it's also really helpful and I recommend doing. I don't know if you've heard the term bird dogging. I don't know if that's a national term.
No. What is that?
It's essentially a term for, if that, let's say you just finished your case and now you got 20 minutes, 20, 30 minutes for the next one. That resident has to put in orders. They got to prep for the next one. They got to, maybe get a snack, go to the bathroom, see a consult, whatever it is. If you say, hey, can I have your number? I'm going to go to the room. I'll text you when they roll back. Because as long as the resident gets there before the attending gets there, they don't get yelled at. If you get there and let them know, then they can maximize their time. They can go do whatever they have to do and come in no sooner, no later than they need to be there. It's a super, super menial task, but it's so incredibly helpful. And it's also nice because then it gives you time. You're not just like awkwardly standing behind the resident as they put in their orders and while, following them, trying to not accidentally go into the bathroom with them. It's a way that is just genuinely helpful and also gives you space. Now you can go and like read up, on the case ahead of time, stare at your phone, like look at your notes, check up on all those things. That's time you have private. You can go mingle with, the OR staff and be buddy with them, talk to them about their pets or whatever it is. And then when they like you, they say nice things about you to the resident and the attending. Like, it's a small thing, but it goes a really long way. And I think the other thing that, again, kind of going with the, being early, it also applies to like your sub-I presentation. Solicit feedback early about what the topic might be. It's easy as a med student to like be too broad or too narrow. Or maybe you pick a great topic, but someone presented it on the sub-I, before you got there. And then residents can kind of give you advice, help you narrow, pick something interesting. And then also like they can warn you like, hey, if you choose this topic, great topic, but you're going to get grilled by, this attending who's the world expert on that, be prepared. Or you can figure out like, oh, well, you should reach out to this attending. They can, give you some advice. And then they become an ally when you present and help defend you up there in case you get a really tough question. It's a thing where it's so hard to do because you're so busy, you're so stressed, but getting a head start on that, I would say can really be helpful. Just kind of the most important thing, like I said, is be on time, don't lie, don't throw people under the bus, and figure out any way you can be helpful, and just try to like be yourself. Because if you're pretending to be someone else, you might match a program that you didn't actually want to be at.
So be a normal person and stay humble is what I'm hearing.
It is.
All the other things that Brett is telling you. Okay, I think that's a great summary of helpful things for med students to be keeping in mind on their sub-Is. I super appreciate your time, Brett, for just sharing this treasure trove of advice and sitting down and taking some time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure. If anyone on the call wants to, reach out, feel free. I think my email is probably on our website, but it's templates.ba@upmc.edu. Feel free to reach out. I'll do my best to get back to you in a timely manner.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to today's episode on preparing for your sub-I rotation. If you are interested in getting involved, please visit us at www.auanet.org/membership or email us at medstudentmembership@auanet.org.